Nice to see everybody this morning. Happy New Year. And let's go get it again. Let's see if we can control some weeds this year. So a couple of things. This is the 13th time that I've been here. And every time I talk about integrated weed management. And that's what I'm going to talk about again, integrated weed management. And this is especially important for sugar beet growers. We can't control weeds alone. We need the help of the rotation. And that'll be the theme of my presentation. Now, I'm going to contradict myself because the rotation is more than just planting different crops and using different products. This is press releases since the beginning of the year that I've received. So I think weed management has another dimension to it. You have to be aware of weed resistance. And you know, there's a map here of North Dakota for kochia, and it shows the different counties that are highlighted. And that's good, but that's not enough. So just because you're growing sugar beets in Trail County doesn't mean you're out of the woods on kochia. What matters is what's going on your farm. So those of you that are crop advisors, I think knowing what your producers, what weeds they have, and if they have resistant weeds is absolutely critical as we go forward. Don't rely on the county map. What really matters is going on, what's happening on your farms with your producers. So I'm going to focus on the weed of the year, water hemp, and I'm going to focus on water hemp on my farm, okay? So this is a field over by Amenia, North Dakota. And there's water hemp in this sugar beet field. And we had water hemp in a lot of sugar beet fields last year. So this one is not better or not worse than some of the others. It's typical of what we had last year. And I'm going to use this as a backdrop as we go through the rest of the presentation today. So water hemp and sugar beets is our most important weed. We do a survey at our various grower seminars, and at every grower seminar, water hemp was the most important weed. So that's in south central Minnesota. That's all the way up in northern part of the valley, up in the Grafton area north. Water hemp is our most important weed in sugar beets. Now there's other weeds, kochia, common ragweed, but most of the emphasis in my program will continue to be controlling water hemp. So our program in sugar beet hasn't changed. That's because there's nothing to report on that's different in sugar beets. Matter of fact, I've taken information off of this graph. Up until this year, we were using glufosinate through a hooded sprayer. And that was a BASF special label that we had. Well, we took that part off of our label because Liberty Ultra is not approved in sugar beets. So if anything, we've lost ground in sugar beets on controlling water hemp. So what have I been doing? Well, one of the areas that we've been working on is fall application. Now, I'm not really that excited about fall application. I think there's some challenges with doing that, but quite frankly, that's all we have. That's the only thing new. The other thing I've been doing is working on what's called Truvera. So Truvera is a stacked sugar beet that contains glyphosate, glufosinate, and dicamba. So we're ready to go. As soon as we get the dicamba label and soybean and cotton, which hopefully will be the inspiration to get the label, and Sugarbeet will be ready to go on that. But again, the messages aren't going to change. Weed control and Sugarbeet will continue to be an integrated crop management process. The other thing that I've been working on some is some of these AI technologies. And especially for the younger people in the audience, I think this is going to be a game changer for agriculture. And I will bet in 10 years from now, Joe at Wide World of Weeds, there will be a number of AI-based presentations on weed management and sugar beets, or excuse me, in crops in general, not just sugar beets. That's how dynamic this new technology is. Now, today the scale isn't appropriate for any crop. The cost is too much, certainly for sugar beets and other North Dakota crops, but that's going to change, and it's going to change very rapidly. So, what are we going to focus on in the short term? And I'll be honest with you, I was pretty frustrated last fall, and quite frankly, didn't have a lot of good answers. So what I chose to do is to have some focus groups. And I had a number of these in sugar beet country to talk to consultants, to talk to retailers, to talk to farmers about what they thought we should be doing to improve weed control. And that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my talk. So here we go. We're back to integrated weed management. And I'll be honest with you, I'm probably being generous here with this herbicide bubble. It's probably even bigger than what's on this map. If we're going to make this thing work in the present and in the future, we've got to work on getting a more integrated approach, figuring out how mechanical control, how cultural control will complement the herbicides that we're using in weed management. And if I had any regrets in what I've done at NDSU, I wish we would have worked more in the mechanical and cultural area. Because quite frankly, we need to grow those bubbles. We need to get a stronger cultural mechanical approach to complement the other things that we're doing. So I'm going to talk about 3 different things during the rest of my talk. I want to talk about getting back to herbicide basics. And you'll see what I mean by that as we go forward. Second, I'm going to talk about mechanical and cultural control, and then I'm going to finish up on prevention. So back to this field again. Water hemp is one of those weeds that it persists across the crop rotation. So I like to say that if you have water hemp, you're going to need 4 to 6 years of good weed control to get rid of it. So that means controlling it in the crop rotation. The normal sugar beet rotation is wheat before sugar beets, and then soybean or dry bean and corn following sugar beets. So we have dry beans, soybean, and corn as places where we can control water now. So I got some help from Joe in December. I asked Joe, tell me your best weed control programs in small grains, corn, and soybean. And this is what he gave me. So I put all of these site of action groups on a chart. And this is what I have. So what do you see here? I want some feedback. What do you see as you look at these circles on the map? Holler out. What do you see? 15s. Lots of 15s. What else? Huh? 4s. Too many group 4s or not enough? Too many group 4s. I'm going to help you out. We don't have too much in sugar beets. Just 15s. Anything else? What do you think of soybeans? In my humble opinion, there's lots of things going on in soybeans, lots of options. So you're right, too many group 15s, not many options in sugar beets, and I'm going to just volunteer that there's lots of different things that you can maybe do in soybean. So just going through wheat, it's a group 27 combined with bromoxynil, and choose your product. Knowing that sugar beets your next crop, you need to use the weed control guide and have crop rotational restriction to sugar beets. These are fields that I saw as I was driving around in 2025. We can't grow a sugar beet crop the next year with these amount of weeds. We've got to do a better job of controlling weeds before we plant sugar beets. So this just isn't going to work at all. So I want to jump to soybean, and I already said, and the soybean producers say, well, controlling weeds in soybean is challenging too. But there's a lot of different bubbles here to choose from. And I think part of that is introducing diversity into the crop rotation of different products, and use the various options that you have as a basis for what you do in the other crops. So I want to spend a little time with corn. People tell me that controlling water hemp in corn is easier than the other crops, okay? So I want to dig into that a little bit more. And what I mean by getting back to the basics is going back and using some of the tools that we have. So one of them that was developed a number of years ago was this herbicide classification chart. And we have some of these, and I was going to bring some, and I might go back to my office and get them. I recommend that you get one of these herbicide classification charts and relearn premixes, okay? Learn what's in premixes and determine if they are effective herbicides for weed control, and in this case, water hemp control. So what I have on the left side is just a checklist that you can look at. You know, look at your fields. What's the most important weed? Are they herbicide resistant weeds? And that means going back again and survey, taking advantage of all the tools. So you're going to hear a talk later today from one of our genomics people, and they're out testing to determine herbicide sensitivity. Take advantage of those services. What are the herbicides and premixes? I mentioned that. What group do they belong? I mentioned that already. Set your expectation for 95% or better control. And, you know, determine the rate that you need to use based on your soils. Use the online labels, and I've highlighted CDMS here. That's my go-to when I want to look at labels. So use those tools to read labels to determine if those are effective herbicides and what rates you need to use. And then use the weed control guide. So for me, I use the guide a lot to determine herbicide ratings against key weeds. I'm interested in crop rotational restrictions. I think the guide is very effective for that. So I want to just do a little bit of a case study here to make my point. So I'm picking on Acuron, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know that much about Acuron, but when I went into the label, what I saw is application PPI, pre and early post-emergence. So lots of flexibility with how to apply. The rate, well, it changes depending on the organic matter that you have in the field. And it controls a lot of weeds, water hemp being one of them. So let's dig a little deeper into that. So using that poster that I had in the previous slide, Acuron is comprised of 4 different herbicides. And two of them are group 27s, a group 5 and a group 15 herbicide. And in principle, they are effective water hemp control herbicides. Next question, what rate should I use? Well, on my farm with 4% organic matter, I need to use 3 quarts. So then the question is, well, what is the rate of these herbicides here that are in this table? What is the rate of those herbicides in the premix? And is that rate effective for the weeds on my farm? So by going into the labels, this is what I determined. You can see what the rate of those products is in the Acuron premix, and then what, according to the other labels, is an effective rate for controlling water hemp. And you know, what I got is, depending on how you do your math, at least 2 effective herbicides, potentially 3 effective herbicides. So let's do something else. I picked on another one. Again, another product I don't know much about. Equally as flexible as Acuron, application PPI, pre and early post. It controls a lot of weeds. On this case, there's only 1 effective water hemp control herbicide, and unfortunately, this product has a rotational restriction to Sugarbeet. So my point here is get back to the herbicide basics. Learn about these premixes, learn how they may fit or not fit in your rotation. Mechanical control. So why do we do tillage? And depending on why you do tillage, that should be one consideration for the equipment that you use. So I asked a bunch of people, tell me the difference between vertical tillage and a row crop cultivator. And you can read these. I'm not going to go through them. Lots of reasons why you might use one or the other. But if the purpose of tillage is to control emerged weeds in the spring, one of these machines is going to work better than the other. So use the equipment that makes sense for what you're trying to accomplish in the spring. Cultivation. I've been a fan of cultivation, and I still am. Unfortunately, my sugar beet growers don't want to cultivate anymore. What we've seen in sugar beet is that we can control emerged weeds in sugar beets. According to Nathan's research, we can control about 70% of our emerged weeds using a cultivation process. Cultural control. Canopy. Canopy is a good thing. The point of this picture is to show you that canopy is going to prevent late season weeds from germinating and emerging. And that's backed with data. This is from some data from a colleague in Missouri. And they did this experiment 2 different ways. They did it based on different crop density, number of plants per acre at planting, and also with the row spacing. In both cases, density helped to control weeds. So from a cultural control standpoint, take advantage of those kinds of tools. Now, one of the things that I've been trying to get our plant breeders to work on are crops that tolerate weeds better. So there was a professor at the University of Minnesota that was working on this. His successor is doing the same. I think you know that I came from Monsanto. I still know a lot of the breeders. I sent them a note last week and asked them, Bayer breeders, are you looking at crop vigor or the crop itself as a way of controlling weeds, and I didn't get any answer. So I think I know what that means. That's not a target of their programs right now. But using these crops as a defense against late germinating weeds, in my opinion, is something that would be beneficial. We use something called nurse crops in sugar beets. We use them because our fields blow in the spring. And this is an example. This is up at St. Thomas. I asked our cooperator, you know, Wayne, you better get out there and get rid of this nurse crop. And this is a little late. You can see the sugar beets are in there. His comment was, I'm worried about the soil blowing and I'm going to wait as long as I possibly can. We've been using fall seeded cover crops as well. And again, this is another regret I have. I think I should have probably done more work with rye in my program. We had one graduate student project on this, and it was geared probably more towards a cover for protecting sugar beets than weed control. But this is something that I think in the future we're going to have to continue to work on. This is an example with a grower over by Amenia who plants his rye in strips. And he does that in the fall, and then in the spring he plants into those strips. So 5 pounds of rye per acre, and what he's seeing is at least some level of control in those strips. Now, interestingly, we planted some rye in the spring, and this was down in the Norcross area. And in that case, in that example, we didn't get nearly the plants themselves did not stand up or collapse. They collapsed a lot faster than what you get with fall seeded cover crops. So there's a difference in how long the residue persists when you fall plant rye versus planting rye in the spring. Last thing I want to do, and I'm going to do this in the last few minutes I have, is talk about prevention. So for me, prevention means not having any weeds go to seed in a field. So one way to do that is to pull weeds. Pull weeds. And you know, we know from surveys that pigweed makes seed. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter which one you have, they all make a lot of seed. So I think an area that we have to talk about more is keeping the weeds out of our field. And you know, so one part of that is the edges of fields. Weeds typically enter fields from the edges. Now, I know there's a lot of reasons why people stay away from the edges. They're worried about their neighbors and drifting in. And I don't think the emphasis on endangered species has helped us there any. Aerial application tends to want to be away from the edges, but in a lot of cases, our weeds enter fields from these edges. So managing weeds, especially on the edges, I think is important. The sugar beet people have heard me say this a lot of times, and I'm going to say it one more time. Somebody has got to own the fence lines. So doing a good job with weed control on both sides of this wheat field or on both sides of these sugar beet fields doesn't do any good if there's a strip of weeds in between. Somebody has to own the fence lines. And this is my last slide. So the last thing I want to say is for you that are cattlemen, be careful about the products you buy and where you buy them. So be absolutely sure that if you're buying hay from some place, that you're aware of what weeds your producer that grew the hay may have, and be careful about introducing his or her weeds into your fields. So that's my last slide. And Joe, I think I've got a couple of minutes for questions. So I'd like to hear what you have to say. Questions?
Through the information on the 27 plus bromoxynil type products, the activity of those herbicides requires good sunlight to kill the weeds. And so we've got, when I'm talking in class with students, I'm always talking about there is no one best answer, because I agree with you. I love crop competition. And for water hemp in our wheat canopies, sometimes that just chokes out the water hemp until late in the season. But we need to get those herbicides on, the Talinor, Tolvera, Husky, on the weeds before the wheat canopy really closes, so that they get sunlight to kill the weeds, which also promotes our other strategy of spraying small weeds. Water hemp that is 3 to 4 inches tall is really difficult to control. Water hemp that's 2 inches tall, much easier to control with those products.
Thank you, Kirk. Anybody else? David. Here, I'm going to come over and see you.
Okay, so if this trait comes to fruition, and think about glufosinate, and we're going to have a speaker a little bit later, we'll talk about resistance. How concerned are you from a sugar beet grower perspective to be overly dependent upon that in this trait in terms of the weeds? And then here's the second part of the question. Mention a little bit about kochia. Here too, we've been talking about water hemp, but let's first talk about that trait. And are we going to have resistance issues for people to become too overly dependent, quote, back to the old Monsanto, the easy button here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's going to be plenty of emphasis today on glufosinate. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that. It's easy for me to say that we have to manage these products across the crop rotation, but use the product in my crop. That's easy for me to say. It's a lot harder for that to come into practice. Am I concerned about glufosinate resistance? Absolutely. Absolutely I am. And I think that starts with right now, making sure we're using it properly in the labels that we currently have. In my opinion, there was way too much glufosinate applied in August of 2025. That was all off-label application. I get it. There was a lot of emerged weeds and people didn't want those to go to seed. But that kind of thing, in my opinion, is the easiest way we're going to get to resistance. So we have to be stewards of these products. When Dr. Hagar talks this afternoon, he's going to talk about some experiences in Illinois. What I'd like to ask him is, what are we going to do when we have 6 or 7 way resistance to water hemp? What are we going to do? Because quite frankly, there aren't going to be any herbicides left. Kochia. Kochia, I don't like water hemp, Dave, but I fear kochia in sugar beets. And the reason is we don't have any good products that control kochia. The good thing is it's going back to the biology. We know that kochia, the seed is viable 1, maybe 2 years, if we can keep it out of our field. And I think this really gets back to the integrated approach and doing everything that we can to manage kochia in the crop rotation, especially Dr. Howitt's wheat crop that's before sugar beets. I'm out of time and I'm going to transition over to Greta. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tom.